Hi, and welcome to episode 51 of CultureWatch Radio. I'm Andrew Smith, and with me is Mr. CultureWatch, Bill Muhlenberg. Bill, it's been a big year. It's been a huge year.
Well, Andrew, actually, it's been a huge 2 years, I think. 2 years rolled into one. It's been such a hardcore situation. COVID, of course, the Wuhan flu started it all, but it's been, as we've talked about before, the various government responses, the various overreach, draconian lockdowns, mandates, health fascism, as we've called it, two-tiered societies developing, all on top of this, right? 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's been 2 years of tyranny, and there's no end in sight. So, yeah, it's certainly been quite a few months, nearly 24 months now of this thing, and it looks like it's going to continue into the next year and perhaps the next. So, yeah, hardcore, and if we had time, we could look at all the aspects, political, economic, social, cultural, but maybe a quick spiritual reflection before we go on. But I know that I, at least, and probably other Christians, before all this happened, were praying, God, something's got to give. The West is in such a bad way. It's so immoral and so sleazy and forgetting its Christian heritage. Something's got to give. So little did I know, and others who were praying 2, 3, 4 years ago, that it might be something like this is part of the answer to our prayers.
Yeah, a little bit of persecution goes a long way, hey, Bill?
Yeah, it sure does.
Everything seems to revolve around COVID, and dare I say, we've got COVID on the nose.
Well, it's been as many have asked, it's been a convenient excuse for expanding government, for big brother statism. We still have plenty of unanswered questions, right? How did it begin in the first place? It does seem to have been from a Wuhan lab. How and why did it begin? How and why did it spread? Why did governments react the way they did? Has there been some, precursors to all this? We have tapes of, recordings of people like Bill Gates and others talking about how global pandemic can be used for various purposes, including population reduction. So a lot of questions, was this a plandemic, as some are saying? So much is yet to come out in the wash. So much is still up in the air. And as we said, that 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Back in 2020, I think in March, some of my first pieces on this that I wrote, I talked about how governments love a crisis. Governments love an emergency. Great way to expand their powers. Great way to keep the masses under their thumb. Just ramp up the fear factor, ramp up the panic porn, ramp up the hysteria. Hey, we're here to keep you safe. You don't mind, do you, if we take away your hard-earned liberties and freedoms? After all, if, we can get you to live longer, it'll be worth it, right? And sadly, the masses have fallen for it. And 2 years on, there's still no end in sight, with even here in Australia, new restrictions coming back into play, WA again shutting down its borders. It's been one thing after another.
Yeah, and pretty much happening as easily as declaring something to be an emergency.
Very easy. In fact, the only thing that's amazed me more, and one of our guests from a while back, George Christensen, he was interviewing me actually last year, and I told him this as well. One of the things that has amazed me and has been so easy, not just the way governments could clamp down on the population, introduce all these draconian laws, strip away all of our basic human rights and freedoms, but the really amazing thing is how the masses have gone along with it. The great majority of people seem to think, oh, that's fine, that's good. The government really does care about us. They really do have our best interests at heart. Therefore, I'm happy to give away my freedoms. I'm happy to stay at home 23 hours a day, locked down, 5-kilometer limits to how far it can travel, masks everywhere, never-ending round of jabs and boosters and more jabs and more boosters. I'm happy to do this because the government wants to keep me safe. So it's been a frightening thing to behold these last few years.
And speaking of the jabs, I mean, this is the Clayton's vaccination. It's a vaccination you have when you're not really having an effective working vaccination.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. I mean, if they're so effective, if they're so helpful, why do we keep needing to get more and more and more? And, the studies are showing that they are not very efficacious. Their lasting effect seems to be, just a few months at best. I warned ages ago there's going to be a never-ending bunch of shots required, jabs, keep going. I had Christians chewing me out saying, "Oh, Bill, you're an alarmist, you're a conspiracy theorist." Well, the funny thing now is watching those double jabbed who are no longer fully vaccinated, right? You need the third and the fourth. And so we got, used to be us lepers looked at as the troublemakers. Now it's the double jabbed. Hey, come on, get with the program. You need your third, fourth, and fifth. Otherwise, you're not fully inoculated and you're going to drag us all down. So we're just seeing amazing stuff being played out. And hate to say it, but some of us said, we told you so.
Yeah. And for some people, surely there must be a waking up moment of going, hang on a moment, this isn't going to end.
Well, it's certainly not going to end well, but it's not going to end as well. And hopefully there are some people finally waking up. And again, many who have been double jabbed. And again, this whole furphy of, anti-vaxxers. Well, look, I'm not anti-vax. I've had plenty of vaccines. What many of us are concerned about is the current rushed experimental Rona vaccines. And many of the people, the hundreds of thousands marching on the streets for freedom, probably most of them have been double jabbed. So the issue is not, we're against vaccination. We're against government overreach, health mandates, health fascism, and in this case, vaccines that really don't seem to be doing all that well. I just read about a cruise ship, right? Only people double jabbed were allowed on it, and surprise, surprise, big outbreak of COVID. This whole thing is just getting to be kind of laughable. And hopefully people are beginning to wake up. Things are not quite as they appear to be.
Yeah. At least the jabbed and the unjabbed will always have something in common. They will never be fully vaccinated.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Bill, there's been a rising up of independent networks and underground movements, such as business directories.
Yeah, well, that's been a necessary response to all this. I just wrote a piece the other week about, the rise of the underground, right? We used to have the early church, met in the catacombs, underground church. Well, we've seen that today. We've interviewed people like Paul Furlong, the pastor who spent 3 weeks in prison. We've interviewed Monica Smith and others who've been part of this underground. She, too, paid the price. With jail time. So you have not just underground churches meeting to find some of these unjust, unreasonable state mandates, including only allowing the double jabbed in to worship God. But we've got alternative health care now being set up, certainly in America and elsewhere, providing for those who are being denied basic health care because they may not be double jabbed. So that's a whole new kind of underground industry. As you said, there's business directories that are now appearing for those who haven't had the 2 jabs. So a lot of people are starting to rise up and say, wait a minute, this two-tiered society, this injustice is not right, and we will cater for those who are being denied basic goods and services. In fact, speaking of WA and McGowan, there was that horrible story the other week of a gal who ended up committing suicide. She was from WA, had gone to New South Wales, couldn't get back in. sadly took her own life. Her parents managed to get over there. Now they are blocked from getting back into their own home state because of McGowan and his ever-running paranoia. Somebody suggested to me we need to start an underground railroad, all right? Maybe digging tunnels under the lousy state borders to get a free movement of people, just like back in America during the Civil War, the slavery issue. There was an underground railroad helping blacks escape to the freedom in the North. Well, it's funny, history repeating itself. We almost need similar things like that today. In fact, we have a huge exodus from here in Victoria. People are fleeing the state to go to slightly less repressive states in the country. So, we're seeing a few things repeating itself here.
Of course, the interesting thing is what's going to happen in the next year. I think if I was to make a prediction, thinking of your comments, particularly on the alternate medical networks for going and seeing a doctor, you would have to have this, it would be this beautiful chance to bypass a lot of bureaucracy.
Well, that's always a good thing, even if this whole crisis just results in a whole new way of doing things, whether governments or health bodies or others. If anything we've learned in the last 2 years is how terrible bureaucracy is. I mean, most of us already knew that, but how bad it can be, how bad unelected bureaucrats, whether health chief officers, whatever, the power that these bureaucrats who are not accountable, not elected, have over the rest of the people. Hopefully a lot of people have woken up to just how bad it has been. They've just made stuff up as they've gone along, totally irrational, often contradictory health mandates. One week it's okay to go 5Ks, next week it's not. You can be in a restaurant, keep that mask on, but when you have a bite of your hamburger, you can take it off because then it's safe. It's all based on the science. Look, if we can clean out some of the madness, the bureaucracy, the government overkill, that will be one real plus out of this whole 2-year crisis.
And it's not just the absolute power that they have, but also the complete lack of compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you think of Queensland. I mean, WA has been bad, Victoria has been bad, but, think of all the people, Queenslanders, who couldn't even get back into their own state, either for their job, their daily work. Sometimes a loved one was dying. They couldn't even get to see them in their last days or get to the funeral, couldn't get to weddings. The list is endless just from Queensland, the hard-hearted premier and bureaucrats there, just preventing people from seeing loved ones. Well, even at Christmas, McGowan is doing it again. WA will be shut down over Christmas. These people they have no hearts. They have no compassion. They have no decency. It's all about power. It's all about politics. It's all about staying in the office, and I'll do whatever it takes, even if it's creating this false panic and having all this horrible social outcomes. They'll do it. So, we've learned, hopefully, that lesson as well. Power corrupts. Politicians love control. They love the ability to run the show, no matter how heartless and cruel they can be at doing it. So, it's been quite a couple of years.
Yeah. And as the journalists would say, follow the money. Always on the pulse. There's more at the Culture Watch website, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of Culture Watch Radio. Subscribe where you listen at SoundCloud, YouTube and Rumble so you don't miss a thing.